then.
Go to the big boy doctors.
Now I do almost only sleep and just a little bit of homework.
And do you think you'll stay asleep? Hi, this is Clara Wagner with Talkback for Teens. This is our Ask an Expert segment on teen sleep. I'm here with Heidi Connolly. Heidi, would you want to introduce yourself?
Happy to. I'm the chief of the Division of Pediatric Sleep Medicine at the University of Rochester in the Golisano Children's Hospital.
Okay, so could you give us kind of just like a broad statement on what you do?
So most of what I do is take care of children who don't breathe and sleep well at the same time. We also do a lot of work with kids that have trouble sleeping, a lot of toddlers that don't want to stay in their own beds, and then we also see a lot of teenagers that are having trouble going to sleep early enough to be able to get up early enough to go to school and be awake during the school day.
So that's really what we're looking to focus on. So I guess my first question is just, statistically, are many teens getting enough sleep?
Probably almost no teens are getting enough sleep. If you let teenagers sleep as much as they'd like over a long period of time, they'll choose to sleep between 9 and 9.5 hours. So teenagers on average need more sleep than adults do, and not as much as like babies or toddlers, but still 9 or 9.5 hours of sleep is a lot for a teenager in today's society. I mean, I think most teenagers are getting lots less than that.
What would you say are some of the factors getting in the way of teens getting those 9 to 9.5 hours?
Well, the biggest one is electronics. The more you spend time in front of screens, so televisions, computers, iPads, any kind of electronic device like that, the less time you sleep on average. The other things that make people be good sleepers, teenagers included, is getting lots of aerobic exercise and bright light exposure. The best place to get that is outdoors. So outdoor exercise is the way to go if you're trying to be a better sleeper.
And so I'm just curious, thinking about some of the factors that you just listed in terms of like screen time and the lights, those are more recent phenomena kind of. So would you say that teens not getting enough sleep, is that something that we've seen increase in like just the past couple of years with phones using more electronics and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's certainly true. The more that the electronic devices become readily available, I mean, when I was a kid growing up, we had one television in the house, and it was a big deal when we got our first television, so there was a lot less exposure to electronics. Now everybody has them in their hand kind of constantly. We certainly know that teenagers who have televisions in their bedrooms sleep less overall. And the more time you spend in front of a screen, the less total amount of sleep time you get, and that's true pretty much all throughout childhood.
Why is sleep important for teens? Obviously, we know some of the general some of the general reasons of why sleep is important for everybody. But is there anything specific to teens that makes sleep particularly vital, that they are getting higher numbers?
Teens, just like anybody else, needs to get good sleep in order to have okay reaction times. That's particularly important for teenagers because they're young drivers, and so they already are having trouble making all of the judgment that's necessary to be a safe driver. And then if you're tired while you're doing it, that just increases the odds that you're going to get involved in a car accident. Sleep deprivation is a big contributor to a lot of car accidents and is more likely to be associated with fatalities because you don't try to avoid the accident because you're not aware of what's going on around you. So motor vehicle crashes are a big one. Falls and just injuries in general are important because the more sleep deprived you are, the more likely those things are to happen to you. And then, the other thing is the biggest job teenagers have is learning because they're in school and doing academic work. And if you shorten your sleep time, you preferentially cut out REM or dreaming sleep because it happens later at night. And that's the place where you move things from short-term to long-term memory. So if you're trying to learn academic information and you're shortening your sleep times, you're making it harder for yourself to remember those things. And we have really good data. We know that kids that, high school students that start school earlier and are sleeping less, if you look at the classes that they take early in the morning, they're learning less information, even though the same things are being taught, than teenagers who take those classes later in the day.
Yeah, interesting. And then earlier on you mentioned that teens do need more sleep than adults. So could you speak a little bit as to why, and when we look at teen sleep, what we see in terms of melatonin, circadian rhythms, and kind of the sciencey side of what's special about teen sleep?
Yeah, okay. So the biggest thing that's special about teenage and young adult sleep is, we all have a biologic clock where we want to, eat 3 times a day, and, we are supposed to feel sleepy at about the same time of night. In adults and in younger children, that biologic clock is close to 24 hours. In teenagers, it's a little bit longer than 24 hours. And so what that means is that if we try to start the day early and get teenagers to go to bed early, they're biologically not able to do that because their biologic clock wants to push them out a little bit longer and stay up later. So that's why the American Academy of Pediatrics is advocating for later school start times for high school students, because if you let them go to bed a little bit later, then instead of just making up that difference, they actually make up more than that difference and sleep longer because they're more able to fall asleep.
Yeah. That was actually another one of my questions about the later start times for schools. I know that some states and counties have tried that, and the results, it seems like, have been really positive in terms of seeing students achieve better when they're able to kind of get those later start times and get more sleep. So do you think that's something that should be could be applied, should be applied, and if so, why don't you think?
So I think it's absolutely a good idea to have all high school start times moved back to a later time. Ideally the current recommendations are around 9 o'clock for a school start time. That's later than almost all of the school districts in the Rochester area. And so, it involves a lot of decisions about how to make that happen. But if all of the schools decided that, all of the extracurricular activities could happen later, all of the after-school things could happen later. And, when you look at school districts that have done that, the car accident rates that involve teenagers are lower. Teacher satisfaction, student satisfaction, academic performance, they're all better. And, since our major job is to keep teenagers safe and to keep them learning, it's really a good thing to move those school start times later.
Yeah, and really some major effects then.
Right. The things that make it hard, it's complicated. The things that make it hard is because most of the school districts recycle buses so that, the buses that take kids to grade school have already been used to take kids to high school. So you would have to kind of flip-flop that bus schedule. But it's actually a doable thing. It's not too hard to make it happen. It just requires a lot of advanced planning.
Do you think it's something that you would guess will happen at some point in the foreseeable future?
I sure hope so, because I think it's the best thing for teenagers' health.
Yeah. And then the next thing is just something that I'm curious about. I know as a youth, I know people who just seem to operate better. Like for me, I know that I need a lot of sleep. Whereas I know other people who seem to be able to function very well on later amounts of sleep. And then I also know I tend to be a morning person. Other people tend to be night people. So are those all just kind of like fallacies, or is it an actual thing to be a night person, morning person, need lots of sleep, need less sleep?
No, it's actually really a genetic thing. So if you come from a family of night owls, you're genetically pre-programmed to kind of be a night owl. Now, as we all get older, like, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we tend to be more, we want to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. So there's some of that. Teenagers biologically want to go to bed later and stay up later and get up later. But even within that, there's people who are kind of night owls and people who are what we call larks or morning people. And you can actually identify the genes that cause that, and they're inherited from the people in your family.
Interesting.
And then you also ask about sleep times, the length of time that you need sleeping. And there's certainly kind of a bell-shaped curve. So there's some naturally short sleepers, some naturally long sleepers, but then the vast majority of us as adults kind of center around 8 or 8.5 hours of sleep where we function the best.
Okay. What do you think are some of the biggest myths that either teens or other people have about sleep as it relates to teens?
So I think one of the big ones is that you need a television to fall asleep. Indeed, that's definitely not true. That light from the screen makes your body not make the hormone melatonin that helps you fall asleep at night. So turning everything off and getting away from bright light in the hour or two before you go to bed will definitely help you fall asleep. That's one. The other one is that people, somehow they kind of think they can teach themselves to need less sleep. Sleep I think of more like drinking water and eating food. You can't learn to need less of those things. Your body needs what it needs, and you just have to provide for it.
Yeah. For you personally, what are some of the biggest messages that you think it's important to get out to teens?
Good sleep habits is the biggest one because it affects the most people. So that would be, and I try to make this real simple, the same, cool, quiet, and dark. So you want to go to bed at the same time, you want to get up at the same time, you want to have the same bedtime routine, and you want to make sure that the place that you're sleeping is cool, quiet, and dark. So that's a good way to kind of have a plan about successful sleep, along with making sure that you get plenty of bright sunshine during the daytime and plenty of exercise. And then the other thing is to talk about sleep disorders, medical problems that make it hard for people to sleep. And sometimes those things kind of get, put underneath the carpet because, it's hard to talk to people about not sleeping well, things like that. And we know that if we don't treat those medical sleep problems, they don't go away on their own. So if you think that you know somebody that might have sleep apnea because they're snoring, or they're moving around a whole bunch when they're sleeping, or they just have trouble sleeping, coming in and getting good medical care for that will help solve those problems. And it doesn't always involve surgery. Sometimes it can be much more simple stuff that'll make those problems be better.
Right, absolutely. Right now, either in research that you're currently working on or research that you know of being done, what's kind of the next step of stuff that they're trying to figure out in relation to sleep?
Oh, I think there's a whole bunch of things that people are, trying to figure out. The genetics of being an early morning versus a late night person, that's a relatively new discovery. People are looking at the genetics of sleep apnea and other ways to treat sleep apnea. The adult treatment for sleep apnea is CPAP, which is a mask that you wear over your nose or your nose and your mouth, and then there's a machine that pushes air in under pressure and it holds your airway open. And that's real effective treatment, but a lot of people don't like to have to use a machine all night in order to breathe, and so people are trying to look at new ways to solve those problems.
Interesting. Where do naps fit in?
So little kids need to nap because remember we talked about that biologic rhythm where it's like 24 hours long. Well, in younger children, their biologic rhythm is so much shorter than 24 hours that they need to nap to kind of restore themselves during the course of the day. So like, babies will nap 2 or 3 times a day, toddlers nap once a day, and kind of by the time you get into kindergarten or first grade, you ought to be giving up napping. The trouble with napping in teenagers is that biologic rhythm is already longer than 24 hours. And so if you restore sleep in the middle of the day, then you're just going to push that bedtime even later, and it makes it hard to fall asleep and stay asleep at night. So once you're done being, 5, 6, 7 years old, you need to not be napping during the daytime because you want to push all that sleep together into nighttime hours instead.
You would say that napping actually kind of does more harm than it does good in terms of getting enough sleep?
Overall, yes. Usually. Things are different if you've got a cold or you're sick or you had a night where you missed a whole bunch of sleep and you need to catch up a little bit, but regular napping isn't a good habit for teenagers.
About sleep habits that can either help or hurt sleep, what are some ways, or what are some things that teens can do, or people in general, in the hour, 2 hours before they go to sleep that promote being able to fall asleep?
So the first thing is to park all those electronics somewhere other than your bedroom. So you don't want to hear the cell phone ringing, you don't want to get all those notifications that are going to wake you up in the middle of the night or after you've fallen asleep. Having a really consistent bedtime routine, so for a teenager maybe that's take a shower, put on PJs, get a light snack. You don't want to eat something really heavy, but you also don't want to go to bed on a completely empty stomach. And then doing something quiet and relaxing. So doing homework right up to the second you go to bed probably not a good idea because you're stressed about it and it's hard to relax enough to go to sleep.
What about stuff like white noise, either falling asleep or when you go to sleep? I know you said that quiet was kind of one of the components of what you want in your sleep environment, but I'm not exactly sure. I know some people like to sleep with fans, or even will kind of have like a TV that they're not watching, but that they just like for the kind of like the constant drone of sound.
Yeah, so, you know, each person is an individual. Some people like it really quiet when they sleep. Some people really like that white noise. And white noise is especially useful, like if you live near a busy street where you can hear things, it'll kind of dampen down that sound so that you don't hear it so much. You do want to be careful about things that are going to catch your attention. So like a television where there's, you know, conversations that you're going to listen to. That makes it harder to sleep, as we're just like white noise, like ocean sounds or a fan or those kinds of things make it easier to sleep. For some people, other people just like it quiet.
Right. Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming in and for sharing this information. And is there any sources of information that you would throw out there for if people wanted to learn more, teens or otherwise?
So the National Sleep Foundation has some wonderful things that are written that are, you know, you can just go on and Google the National Sleep Foundation, and there's some good information there that is of really high medical quality that, you know, is good instructions about sleep and things like that.
Well, like I said, thank you so much. Again, this is Clara Wagner for Talkback for Teens. You can see more and join the discussion at our website, talkbackforteens.com, and we hope to see you next time.
Never known to nap. Believe the dream is a dangerous trap. Sharp and cunning foe. A flimsy straw that's waiting to snap. Hey, darling, listen up. Don't take the easy route. Oh, darling, shut me up. You sway those sweet hips now. Never known to nap, 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 never known to nap. Some things are reaching me now, some things are living in the dark of my brain. I think the black thoughts are gone. It's like a millstone, ground them away. Hey, darling, listen up. Don't take the easy route. Oh, darling, shut me up. You sway those sweet hips now. I'm never known to nap.